Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Cyclonic Thrift Podcast, a series focusing on deck building, card analysis, and financial speculation, all through the eyes of a commander player on a budget. I'm one of your hosts, Christian, joined as always by,
Zach, welcome everyone.
and we are happy to have you on this episode of the Cyclonic Thrift Podcast, where we will be discussing the Adventures in the Forgotten Realms commander decks. Now, we'll be talking a little bit about what the decks are made up of, but our main focus is the commanders themselves, doing a breakdown analysis of them, maybe giving you some cards that would be really synergistic in those decks if you were to build them. We're not fully looking at like, okay, this is the pre-con, here's how you upgrade it. That's not necessarily what we're doing. We will talk about the pre-con a little bit. Zach has a good amount of knowledge on those, but overall, it's just going to be a overview of each commander and how good we think they are, what the decks look like, all those things. Anything else you want to add before we jump in, Zach?
Yeah, I think that pretty much covers it.
A lot of the card, well, not a lot. Some of the cards we're talking about are from the most recent set that just came out. So the D&D set. If you didn't listen to our last episode, go ahead and give that a listen. Don't know if anything from that will come up, but there are some cards from that set that will find their way into this video. So with that in mind, let's jump in. We're going to begin with the first of the four decks, and we're going to begin with Aura of Courage, which is our Bant deck. The poster commander is one of the poster commanders is Galia, Candler of Hope. So Zach, let's jump in with her.
So I'll go ahead and read what she does. So Galia, Kindler of Hope, is a 1 green, white, blue. She's a legendary creature, elf knight. So 4/4 has vigilance. Just may look at the top card of your library at any time, and you can cast or an equipment spells from the top of your library. And when you cast an equipment spell this way, it gains. When this equipment enters the battlefield, attach it to target creature you control. So obviously, this is an Enchantress deck, and you get the big payoff is you get to auto equip equipment when it enters the battlefield, and you can look at the top card of your library anytime. So you'll be able to cast those run equipments off the top. So you know you maybe have like a top deck manipulation kind of sub theme going on, but I think even without that, this is a pretty good effect. Being able to equipments for free is really strong.
Yeah, absolutely. I have an Azan deck. This is kind of the same case where you can get stuff off for free, and having played that, it's a very powerful effect. Equipping this for free, a lot of equipment just feels weaker because you have to put so much mana into it. Um, to equip it, but if you can avoid that, most of them are just better than the auras that you equip. They just provide so much value in what they do. So I think this is a very powerful commander, Zach. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think this is one of the uh, stronger of the precons, but then also just stronger in terms of other like Voltron kind of commanders that care about ores and equipments. I think Bant is a great color combination, and a lot of the Aura commanders are Bant, like Tuvasa. Uh, And I think, like we said, attaching equipments for free is really strong, especially when you look at some of the cards that you could potentially run in here. Stuff like Belt of Giant Strength, which is 1 and a green, and equipped creature has base power and toughness 10/10. It normally costs 10 to equip minus the power of the creature that you're equipping it to. But in this case, if you have Galia out, you just equip that for free. So that's really strong. Same thing with Colossus Hammer, which gives 10/10, plus 10 plus 10, but it costs 8 to equip. So, stuff like that is just gonna be able to pump up your creatures really quickly and for no mana as long as you have Galia out.
Yeah, all those are like good examples of a way to abuse this commander's ability. Just huge buffs to their power toughness that you just cheat out. And now, of course, it's a good thing this deck has blue because you are probably going to want some type of top deck manipulation, your ponders and brainstorms, omens, things like that. Because you can't get that free equip unless you're casting it off the top. So you need to make sure that you're hitting that part of it. But even with that in mind, if you're running those top deck and hand manipulation cards, you know what you're gunning for. Like Zach said, the Belt of Giant Strength, Colossus Hammer, good examples. And beyond cards that are going to beat face in this deck, SRAM, Senior Edificer, I think is a must-have at 2 mana 2/2. Legendary creature Dwarf Advisor. Whenever you cast an aura, equipment, or vehicle spell, draw a card. This deck is just going to be full of aura and equipment spell, so you're just going to be drawing cards like a crazy person. So, all in all, strong colors, great colors for what it's doing, and it does it really, really well. And just what it's interacting with, equipment and auras, is just strong. And a 4/4 for 4, I mean, you don't get much better than that.
Yep, completely agree. I think it's a strong option.
Now, with that in mind, though, are there any weak points to this commander? Are there any cons?
Well, I think the main thing is that you don't get the free equip if you don't cast it off the top. So, like, if I
Yeah.
get my, Colossus Hammer, Belt of Giant Strength into my hand, I might be, more inclined to maybe wait until I get a Brainstorm or something like that, so I can put that back on top and try to, cast it off the top and get the free equip. So, just stuff like that. It might slow you down a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think you're gonna favor equipments over auras in this deck, maybe just because of that free equip. That could possibly turn into a downside, but I don't know. I think you really have to play it to figure that out. But other than that, I think it's definitely a strong commander option.
Yeah, I know when we were kind of analyzing and talking about this card that we were like kind of like where's the aura love, I guess. Cuz your equipment is getting put on for free and you can cast auras off the top, but what's the benefit from casting an aura over an equipment? We talked about something simple like gain 2 life or scry a card or something like that, right? So it's kind of surprising to see the aura got absolutely no additional attention like equipment did in terms of the free cast, so or free equip. So, that's kind of strange. But yeah, like I said, this card's great. I think it's a great commander option. If you've been wanting to build Voltron, you can do it. Just equipment decks in general, this is a way to go. If you don't want to put them on one creature, but you want to spread out your equipment, it's a great option for that too. So yeah, she's currently sitting at $4.61 that I could find. So I think I think this is a top-notch commander, maybe one of the best ones of this entire all 8 of these pre-con commanders. Easily.
Yeah.
All right. Moving on to our second commander. As long as there's nothing else you want to add to Galia.
Nope.
Cool.
I'm good.
All right, moving on to the second then of the Aura of Courage deck is Storvald Frost Giant Jarl. He is a 7-drop 7/7, costing 4 generic, green, white, blue. He's a legendary creature giant who has Ward 3 and says other creatures you control have Ward 3. Whenever Storvald enters the battlefield or attacks, choose one or both. Target creature has base power and toughness 7/7 to end of turn, or target creature has base power toughness 1/1 until end of turn. What are your thoughts on Storvald, Zach?
Yeah, so I think he's good. I think the fact that he gives everything Ward 3 is really good.
Yeah, that's insane.
And just so everybody knows, basically Ward is whatever the word value is, in this case 3. If you were to cast a spell, or if an opponent specifically were to cast a spell that targets one of your things, they would have to pay 3 or that spell will be countered. So I think that's obviously really strong protection. That's a pretty big deterrent with 3. So that's really good. As far as his actual ability with making the 7/7 and 1/1, I think it's interesting. It would be cool if you were able to trigger it multiple times somehow. Like, if I could make multiple 7/7s, I think stuff like that could give that to your other creatures, like some green effects that make all your base power and toughness equal to uh, certain creatures, something like that. If you can make all your stuff 7/7s, that would be good.
Yeah, I know what you mean because like you're paying 7 mana, and don't get me wrong, turning a 1/1 into a 7/7 is just good. And honestly, everything having Ward 3 is just crazy. But
Mm.
it just seems like it could have done a little bit more for 7 mana. I mean, I'd be willing to drop the 7/7 power down if I could affect more things in different ways, you know?
Yeah.
I think the main point of this deck is you're going to want to be making use of the fact that something is now a 7/7. A couple ways to do that are if, let's say, you have a mana dork out, you know, you're late in the game, you don't really need it anymore, you choose to turn it into a 7/7. An option is Greater Good. 2 green green for an enchantment, sacrifice a creature, draw cards equal to the creature's power, then discard 3 cards. You know, you turn your mana dork into a 7/7 that turn, you just crack it, draw 7 cards, discard 3 cards. I mean, that's really good. And you didn't really put any extra work into doing that. Your commanders turned them into that and you sacked it. Now, beyond that, um, an option when if you decide to keep it out to abuse the fact that it's just one of them is a 7/7. You have Wild Beastmaster. 2 and a green for a creature, it's a human shaman. Whenever Wild Beastmaster attacks, each other creature gets +X on a turn, where X is Wild Beastmaster's power. So obviously, you just want to hit Wild Beastmaster, turn into a 7/7. You're going to pump everything +7/7. Those are going to be your ways you make use of the 7/7 while it's out there. Because, like we said, you're only one thing's getting 7/7. So you need to find a way to spread that love to the rest of your board, I guess.
Yep. And yeah, I agree. I think being able to make everything into 7/7s really is gonna be the key here to kind of finishing out the games. But yeah, another option that we have here as far as stuff that would synergize with this is Realm Cloak Giant. So that's 5 white white for a giant, and it has adventure. Uh, so its adventure ability is cast off, costs 3 white white for sorcery, and it's destroy all non-giant creatures. So if you really needed to board wipe, this would basically let you save your commander. And since you're running a giant commander, we just figured you might as well run this card if you're you know, running a giant. There's not really any other situation outside of that where you'd probably run this.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if you're in white, odds are you're bringing at minimum 1 board wipe, right?
Mhm.
Um, and if you're going to do that, you might as well just bring this and save your commander, instead of just wiping him with the rest of the stuff.
Yep.
Uh, I think both of us like this guy. He's a little expensive. We love the ward, and the idea is cool. I always like the kind of manipulation of creatures themselves. Um, but the big con for me, and we talked about this, is that base power toughness 1/1. Sure, you could turn something into a 1/1 chump blocker and you have trample, but how do you really abuse that?
Yeah, I mean, if we were in black, we'd have more options there as far as destroying 1/1s, putting neg one counters on stuff. But yeah,
Exactly.
I think in Bant, it's going to be difficult to take advantage of that.
Yeah, exactly. If this had black, it'd be insane because that just makes something
Yeah.
cheap removal. But yeah, I don't know. So he's a fun commander. He's a good commander. The options we gave you to put in this deck are, I think, great. Like they work so well with him, and they do find ways to abuse him. So he is abusable, but he's expensive, and I wish you could do a little bit more with what he did, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
Uh,
there are a lot of other options in Bant that maybe you would play before him, but overall, I think he's good and interesting.
yeah, he's if nothing else, he's pretty fun, I guess.
Yeah.
Uh, moving on to our next deck, if we're all good to go, um, we'll be jumping into Draconic Rage, which is our Gruul deck. Um, with that, go ahead and take us into Vrondis, Zach, our poster of the deck.
Yep. So this is an interesting deck. I'll go ahead and read Frondus here. I think he's pretty strong, but he says Frondus Rage of Ancients. He's 3 green red for a legendary creature, Dragon Barbarian. It's a 5/4. He has Enrage. Whenever Frondus Rage of Ancients is dealt damage, you may create a 5/4 red and green Dragon Spirit creature token. With when this creature deals damage, sacrifice it. And whenever you roll 1 or more dice, you can have Frondus deal 1 damage to itself. So uh, obviously, looking at this, there's a lot of potential here with the uh, 5/4 red and green dragon creature tokens. That's a pretty big creature token, and you don't really have any limit on how many you could potentially make per turn. There's no, this only activates once kind of clause on this. So obviously you're going to care about rolling dice in this situation because that's kind of his built-in way to trigger that enrage effect. And I think that's pretty strong, especially with cards that are going to let you roll multiple dice. Because, well, actually, no, that's not true. Because it's one or more dice. But anyway, I think you're going to want to run some of those cards to combat rolling dice. But then also there's some uh, cards outside of that that we think would be good. For example, Outpost Siege says whenever it's a mode, but one of the modes is whenever a creature you control leaves the battlefield, Outpost Siege deals 1 damage to target creature or player. And obviously, since these dragons are going to be getting sacrificed after they deal damage, there's a lot of potential there for getting values from that sacrifice trigger. And stuff like Garruk's Uprising, where every time a creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, you can draw a card. Kind of have a good engine there, and that every time you make one of those tokens, you're going to be able to draw, and your stuff gets trampled. So you'll be able to get that damage through a little bit easier, and get the sacrifice triggers.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I think Outpost Siege is a great option because you go to combat, you hit all these guys with your 5/4s. They leave because they dealt damage, and when they leave, you'll just shoot Vrondis 3 times and make 3 more of them. So
Yeah,
it's like they didn't even leave; they just stick around. And obviously, like you said, it really is an engine with Garruk's Uprising, man. I mean, you just are pumping out these 5/4s in most cases, and just drawing a card off each one, and now they have trample. Like, geez, that's for 3 mana too.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
it gets out of hand quick. Now, these tokens, 5/4 is good and it's big, and you only get one shot with them. So you're going to try in some cases with this deck to make as much use of them as possible. Now, for me, that would mean, obviously lifelink isn't really there in red green. So I'm thinking, what's the maximum way to do damage? Well, you would initially think double strike, but that doesn't actually work in this deck because when they do the double strike damage, they'll hit the first time. Well, that'll trigger when they dealt damage, they're going to sacrifice. You won't actually get the second hit from double strike. So what you need to do is focusing on just output doubling damage in general. And a good way to do that is Gratuitous Violence, which got a recent reprint. For 2 red, 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 it's an enchantment. If a creature you control will deal damage to a opponent or player, it deals double that damage to opponent or player. So now your dragons are hitting for 10 instead of 5. So again, just another way to just completely beat face, get as much value as you can out of these 5/4s before they go away.
Yeah. The only downside I would say to that one would be, you have Rondus who has to take damage, so he'd be, if you're rolling dice, he's going to take 2 damage, so you'd only be able to activate him like once a turn that way.
True. I
But
know
yeah, I
there's like
think,
rage reflection, I guess, right? Is only your stuff,
yeah, yeah.
so you might be ways around it. But yeah, with that in mind, what cons do you see in this commander, Zach?
Uh, I mean, sacrificing, you're not going to get as much value out of sacrificing green red as you would in a black deck most of the time.
Yeah,
So the fact that the tokens sacrifice themselves is, kind of a downside. Uh, and like we were just talking about with gratuitous violence of Rondus, he only has 4 health, so you're gonna have, or 4 toughness, so you're gonna have to kind of be tactical about how much damage you're dealing to him every turn. You don't want to kill him, and you got to
yeah,
keep getting value over and over again. So that's something to think about.
yeah. I could see like you ping him 3 times, you're feeling good, and then someone just
Yeah,
shocks him or something like
yeah,
that. I mean, we don't see a lot of those just cheap burn spells in commander because it doesn't kill a lot, but they're there, especially like the damage divided, and this guy would definitely be a casualty in that case.
yeah.
Other than that, I mean, I don't think he's that bad. I would have liked to have seen something other than dice trigger him.
Mhm.
I just again we talked about in our last episode. There's not as many good dice rolly things just yet. Um, and who knows if we'll ever get him again. And I wouldn't really. I'd run the good ones. I'll say that, but I will just because it says roll dice on it. I don't. It's not an auto include. I don't think. it has to still be good enough to make the cut of the deck.
Yeah, and I think there are other things you could use to deal damage to this that would be just as efficient. So, like I would run some of the new guys like forget what it is, but there's a new card that whenever it attacks, you roll a dice and you create either one, two, or three treasure tokens based on what you roll. Like I think that's pretty good. I would run something like that, but I wouldn't just run a dice specific or run a card specifically, but because it says roll a dice.
Yeah, I 100% agree because like there was actually a good handful of dice rolly red cards. I'm trying to remember talking. Oh yeah, you're talking about the treasure token one you said, right?
Yeah, hoarding ogre.
Hoarding ogre. Yeah,
Yeah,
that card is good. That was almost my top red from our last episode. That's a good one. And then there was the chaos channeler that exiles cards off the top, and you can play them on a turn by rolling a dice as
yeah,
well. So those are both actually. I would probably put those two in this deck as well. I think the roll is good enough, and their abilities are good, and it triggers him. Yeah, so those are good examples of rolls that matter. Otherwise, I'm not sure how many other options there are for him.
yeah.
All right, well, jumping into our second Draconic Rage commander, Cloth, Unrivaled Ancient. He is a 7-drop 4/4 legendary creature dragon that costs 5 generic, red and a green. He has flying and haste. Whenever Cloth Unrivaled Ancient attacks, add X mana in any combination colors, where X is the total power of attacking creatures. Spend this mana only to cast spells. Till end of turn, you do not lose mana as steps and phases end. What are you thinking for this guy, Zach?
So I think he's really cool overall. There are definitely some cards that will be good in this deck. Some examples that we picked out here are Overwhelming Stampede. So basically, you could give everything, just pump everything up, and give it trample to get some damage through. And the idea here is that you're going to be getting a lot of mana. So your second main phase, you're just probably going to be flooding the board with big creatures that are going to be able to get through, and this will give them trample. So that'll be give them trample and some extra attacks. So just to finish out the game. And another example is Savage Vent Maw, which is a similar effect. Basically, every time it attacks, you're going to add 3 red and 3 green to your mana pool. So that'll just give you some extra mana in your second main phase, along with what you get from Klothys, and it only costs 6, so you might end up getting that out before him and maybe ramping into Klothys later on, since he is a 7-drop. It's a little more expensive.
Yeah, I think all those play. I think just a lot of it is going to be based on pumping your guy as much as you possibly can because his power or his abilities based on total power. So like you said, the overwhelming stampede. Assuming you choose, just say you choose Cloth, it's always getting +4/+4, and you have 5 guys. I mean, that's an additional 20 mana on
Yeah,
top of whatever their power already was. And that's insane. I mean, your second main phase is going to be crazy. Um, and with that in mind, you're going to need things to cast. So if you're spending the whole time pumping these guys up, buffing them in terms of power, you can use Return of the Wild Speaker. It's 4 and a green for an instant. Choose one. The one we care about is draw cards equal to the greatest power among non-human creatures you control. So, assuming you've just pumped everything, let's say it was 6/6, 7/7 dragon out, you pumped it all that much, that's 14. You can just draw 14 cards off that guy. And not only that, but you've got at least 20 mana to work with. You're going to have an explosive second main phase. It's going to be overwhelming quickly, as red green kind of just does. So,
yeah, there are a lot of great options along with Return of the Wild Speaker for draw and green. Like Hunter's Insight would be good. Garruk's
very
Uprising
much.
even would be good.
Yeah,
Greater Good would also be good. I think there's a lot of good options for refilling your hand in this color combination.
100%. And of course, he gets any combination of colors, so you shouldn't have any
Mhm.
trouble casting everything you draw.
Yep.
Uh, is there any problems with this commander, you think, Zach?
He does cost 7, so
Yeah.
it's a little pricey, and he does have haste, which I think is really good. I actually didn't notice
Yeah.
that at
I didn't
first, so
even.
that's really nice.
Yep, that's sweet.
I mean, other than that, just making sure that you don't even have to necessarily get the damage through because it's on attack. I mean,
Yeah,
obviously you'd like to, but
right.
I think he's really good. I don't think there's any massive downside to this commander.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Obviously, it's all based on him attacking is what actually triggers it.
Mhm.
You need. It's interesting because you need him to attack to get the trigger, but all of the ability depends on everything attacking. So it's kind of weird. And that way, you need to make sure he's protected. He's getting through safely. I mean, obviously he's flying, so he's got a little bit of protection in that. But yeah, Rogue's Passage might be good here just to make sure he's safe. All those
Yeah,
kinds
and
of
you
things.
do, like you say, you do want a board. You want to set up before you get this out, right? He's not going to do much if you're only attacking with him, so you definitely want to have other stuff out and ready to attack on the turn that you play this, and then attack with him since he has haste.
Yeah, I could also see another thing is building the deck might be a little bit tough in terms of obviously you need to ramp because you need to be able to cast
Mhm.
him as soon as possible. You need to be able to um, lay anything big so you can get the maximum amount of mana added and just have mana to buff them or pump them or whatever. But at the same time, you don't want to overflow on mana ramp because when he's triggering, it's gonna suck to spend the 20 mana he just gave you on explosive vegetations and cultivates. Like, you know what I mean? You don't want to
Mhm.
overwhelm yourself with ramp because his whole point is giving you mana, but you need to have enough ramp to make sure you get there. So it's kind of a weird spot in terms of deck building for that.
Yeah.
Beyond that, I like him a lot. I think he's really cool. Um, I think there's a lot of actual strong potential for your typical, Gruul Stompy build. He's currently $14.64 that I can find, which is kind of a lot, especially compared to Galia. So, yeah, I like him though.
Yep. Me too. All right. So I'll take us into our next precon here, which is the Dungeons of Death precon. The poster commander for this precon is Cephas of the Hidden Ways. He's white, blue, black for a 2/3 legendary creature, human wizard. It reads, whenever one or more creature cards are put in your graveyard from anywhere, venture into the dungeon. This ability triggers only once each turn, and is create undead. Whenever you complete a dungeon, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this is obviously a dungeon-based deck. Uh, you know, there are a couple good cards in this color combination for dungeons. Something that we think is an auto-include in this deck is Hama Pashar Ruin Seeker, which basically gets you double triggers off of all the room abilities of dungeons. So that's just going to be good, and that you're going to be doubling your value from doing dungeons. And something else that we think would be good in here is Radiant Solar, which is a 3/6 angel with flying and lifelink, and it reads whenever it or another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, you venture into the dungeon. And this kind of synergizes with Cephas's second ability, where whenever you complete a dungeon, you can return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So that's a pretty cool little synergy there. And then the last thing we have here is Viscerous here, which is a sack outlet. So it's a 1/1 for 1 black, and says sacrifice a creature. It's scry 1. So since Cephas does trigger only once per turn, whenever anything goes into the battlefield, you really want to be sure that you can kind of guarantee that trigger. So having a sack outlet is just going to let you do that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, even though it's only once each turn, which is a con we'll get into in a second, you definitely want to make sure you're doing it each turn. And with something like Viscerseer, that you were able to sack at instant speed, you could just sack something on your turn, next turn, sack something, next opponent's turn, sack something until it gets back to you. And you'd venture, I mean, a pretty good rate, I think, Zach, as long as you have the things to be sacking, right?
Yeah. As long as you've got creatures, you can keep sacking. And the nice thing is, when you complete that dungeon, you're going to be able to return something from your graveyard. So, this kind of fuels itself in that, if you sack something that you want to be able to return. It's, let's say you sacrifice a venture into the dungeon, ETB, you're going to be able to return that when you complete a dungeon and start venturing again. So it's, it is kind of nice in that way that it has that second ability because it's just going to keep feeding itself.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you just run on top of like what we talked about. Maybe you run some of the um like white when it enters the battlefield you make spirits, or some of the black when it enters you make goblins. There's or fairies or something like that. There's like goblin rogue or something like that, and Geist honored monk, when they enter they make tokens with them. So you would, they'd enter, you'd sack them one turn, next turn sack a token, next turn sack a token. You've already ventured 3 times, and by that time you can bring it back out, right?
Mm.
So, there's ways to kind of chain it, especially, with like we talked about Hama Pashar, that's just a lot of value.
Yeah.
So I think this is one of the better, if you're gonna play dungeon, if you're not running Hama Pashar like we talked about, this is probably your next best bet.
Yeah, I agree. And looking at this, it's better than I initially thought.
Same.
Especially with Hama Pashar and that second ability. I think this is a good dungeon option. I don't know if I like it or Hama Pashar better as the commander, but I think they're both good options if you really want to run a dungeon commander. But as far as cons for this card, I think clause that Christian and I've talked about a lot and both really don't like on any card really is this ability triggers only once each turn.
Yeah.
That really limits what you can do.
Just ruins the fun, man.
Yeah.
It does. Like, that's the best way I can describe it. It ruins the fun. It's just like, I get balancing, but at a certain point, it's like there's so many other commanders that just do stuff as much as they want. I don't see why others can't.
Yeah, I think you're kind of limiting the plays that this guy's going to see by adding that because, like you said, there's so many other things that from the past. Because I feel like this is a clause that wasn't really added commonly until
The
these
past like
last
two
couple
or
of
three
sets
years.
we've seen. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like
Like,
older commanders, are going to be able to just be more abusable because there's no hard limit on how many times they could do that.
yeah, I mean, think about my warp deck. Imagine if it said, red and green spells have conspire, you can do it only once each turn. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
come on, like, that's no one's gonna play that. And I don't think this necessarily falls in that trap because of so much instant speed sack, which can be used to trigger it, but it still just makes it significantly slower, much less abusable. Um, as soon as Zach and I see that clause on a card, it almost instantly doesn't make it into our top 5
Yep.
for any of our set reviews. It's just, you just can't abuse it like you could, so it's kind of disappointing. Um, yeah, I think that's my biggest con for this commander. Obviously, another potential con is just the power level of the dungeons is obviously in question. Um, some are better than others. Some of them don't really do much you care about, but hopefully, if you're doing this, you're kind of um, you're gonna make use of the abilities they do have, of the 3 that are out there.
Yeah, and like we said in the last set review that we did, we're not likely to see more dungeons, we don't think, in the future,
Yeah.
as well as like just cards in general that support dungeons. So you're going to be pretty limited in the subset of things that really care about dungeons in the long run.
Yeah. Um, I guess, like you mentioned, between the Hama Pashar and Sephiroth, which one? I guess one thing you have to look at is, at least in this deck, Sephiroth, you don't have to run Venture in the Dungeon stuff. You can strictly use her ability.
Hmm.
Whereas Hama Pashar, you have to run some kind of Venture in the Dungeon cards, and arguably those might be weaker than just running anything you want and using Sephiroth's ability. So it's a kind of a toss up. Um, yeah, it's just weird. It's hard to say. I can't give a concrete answer, unfortunately, between which one I like more. I know last episode I said if you're running dungeon, you absolutely run Hama Pashar. Um, if your whole game plan is strictly dungeons, I think it is Hama Pashar. But if you want to make use of the dungeons with some graveyard interaction, like beyond dungeon, I think it's Sephiroth.
Yeah, I think, I was pretty sold on Hampashar.
Me
Just
too.
looking, like, compared to the other commanders in the set, not in the precons, but just in AFR in general,
Yeah.
uh, that care about dungeons, I think Hampashar outshines the rest of them by a good margin.
Yep,
Uh,
definitely.
but if you include Sephiroth in that pool, I think I like Sephiroth in that you're gonna have a lot more options for your gameplay, and right, you're not reliant, like Christian said, solely on dungeons. This does kind of give you a way to more passively abuse dungeons, but still do things that Esper cares about outside of dungeons. So I think I like this better as a commander with Tama Pashar in the 99.
Yeah, and like you said, gives you access to black because Esper.
Hmm.
So if like we said, we're sticking our guns in the last episode, Hampashar is the single best among the set. Now, if we look at it, including this commander selection, Sephiroth might be better just because of the additional options. But if you're just like, all I want to do is push dungeons, I think Hampashar is still better.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
Um, all right, our second Esper commander is Nihilor, which again I don't know my D&D characters, but he looks kind of crazy. Uh, 2 white, blue, black for a legendary creature horror. He's a 3/5. He says when Nihilor enters the battlefield, for each opponent, tap up to one untapped creature you control. When you do, gain control of target creature that player controls with power less than or equal to the untapped creature's power for as long as you control Nihilor. Whenever you attack with a creature an opponent owns, you gain 2 life and that player loses 2 life. So, first impression, there's like a mind control league kind of thing going on. Your creatures can suddenly gain control of opponents' creatures that are weaker than them. It's kind of flavorful. It's pretty cool. I think Esper's good colors for this. Um, but honestly, I'm not in love with this commander.
Yeah, I agree. The first thing that comes to mind for me when I see this is like centriplets. I think this would be good in the 99 for that, maybe. It's kind of a similar thing where you're, kind of a mind control type effect. Uh, but we'll go through some cards that we think are good synergy with this. So the first one is Ephemerate. So it's a bounce effect, lets you exile a target creature and return to the battlefield under its owner's control. It has rebound as well. And basically, this is like, say you have Neilor and you wanted to maybe switch targets. Maybe the next person's turn came up and they, play something that you just don't want them to get any value of. You want to gain control of it. You could exile Neilor, bring him back to the battlefield, and just change what you're targeting with him. So it just gives you a little bit more versatility there. And then something else we were looking at is Soul Herder, and uh, he says whenever a creature's exiled from the battlefield, you can put a +1/+1 counter on them, and at the beginning of the your end step, you can exile another target creature you control and return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. So that's kind of in a similar vein to Ephemerate there. Uh, it just gives you bounce effects, so you can switch up what you're targeting with Neolor. Uh, and then finally, something that we thought was good is Agent of Treachery, which just lets you gain control of people's permanents when it enters the battlefield. You gain control of target permanent. And at the beginning of your end step, if you control 3 or more permanents you don't own, you draw 3 cards. So, that's pretty strong in that, if you're in a 4-man pod, uh, Neilor is going to let you take 3 things when he enters the battlefield, so you'll automatically get that Agent of Treachery trigger. And even if you only have 2 opponents left, if you play a Neilor and play Agent of Treachery, then you'll have those 3 permanents there. So I think that's a pretty strong include in this deck.
Yeah, I mean, he's $5 right now, so he is not what we would call budget, but in this deck, he is what we would call a force include because he's so good anyway, and he plays right into the game. I mean, the fact that if he enters, you automatically are getting his draw 3 effect because of Nihilor.
Mhm.
I mean, that's just insane. Um, on top of that, obviously you can tell based on the cards we've mentioned, Ephemerate, Soul Herder, this is probably going to play into a bounce effect deck or a flicker at least, and flickering and bouncing Agent of Treachery is just insanely powerful. You get way more value out of it by doing so. if you're playing a deck, you're just playing Ancient Treachery once and that's the end. You probably aren't caring that much about him. Not worth it. But in this deck, he plays right to the game plan. Um, I think you just force him in at $5. I don't even care. I think he just fits so well in this deck.
Yep.
On top of that, anything he gains control of is going to, if it's a creature, it's going to trigger Nihilor's ability. Whenever you attack, it drains and you gain life. So yeah, I think this deck actually could be fun. I know I said I didn't like it as much when we at the start of this, and I'm not in love with it. Mind control can be cool. I'm not fully sold on him. The thing about it, I guess this is getting into the cons now. I don't like that you choose these creatures to tap to gain control of stuff, but they're irrelevant. If Nihilor goes away, all three of them kind of lose their control. And I thought that was strange. I thought it would care about the creatures that have been tapped to gain control of stuff, but it's not. It's just Nihilor.
Yeah, yeah, I think that would kind of make more sense actually. Now that you mentioned it, was like you're tapping that creature that you own specifically to get these. So it's kind of weird that it doesn't really care about that. But yeah, and as far as other cons, like with power, I personally I would expect this to be CMC just because I feel like an Esper, maybe a lot of times you probably don't care about power of your creatures very much. A lot of the stuff that you typically run in Esper is more about the abilities they have versus the power toughness. Unless you
Yeah,
run, say, like a sea creature stick or something like that, maybe.
yeah, definitely. That's what I thought, and yeah, that was strange to me as well. I mean, other than your big sphinxes, I guess
Yeah,
Esper doesn't really have a lot of big power. I mean, you got angels and demons, I guess, like you said, sea creatures, but like they're not just automatically going in every Esper deck, especially not this
right.
one, I don't think. So at most, you might have a big demon that draws you cards in this deck or something, but it's just yeah, power was a strange choice. Like Nihilor being the only thing that matters was a strange choice. The effect that has attacks with a creature an opponent owns, you gain 2 life, and they lose 2 life. That is cool. I kind of wish it did a little bit more than that. Like if you end the turn with 3 creatures, basically like a Agent of Treachery. If you end the turn with 3 things that opponents own, you draw a card or you can destroy a creature, something like that. I mean, that might have been a little bit overpowered, but I wish it was a little bit more than draining because I also feel like Esper doesn't really attack a lot.
Yeah, and I guess I don't know. I feel like the drain is almost irrelevant in this case,
I feel like it is too.
but yeah, I mean, obviously the main thing is like you're taking away resources from opponents, right?
Yeah,
But
that is it.
yeah, and I think say just for fun here, we'll say you're playing against Vrondis or something like that. I think it's going to be tough to get value sometimes against stuff like that, especially like battle cruiser decks that are going to care about having big power toughness creatures because you're going to have a lot of limitations on what you can take just because the creatures you're running in Esper are probably not going to have that
As
much
much
power
power.
compared to
Yeah,
those.
true.
Yeah. And the
Yeah.
other thing is like you're really going to have to protect Nihilor a lot because as soon as he leaves, you lose control of everything. So
Yeah, I also feel like in most cases, like if you were to take Vrondis, right, and you swing with him, I feel like in most cases you don't if you steal someone's commander, you don't want to be swinging with it because what are they going to do? They're just going to block it, kill it, get it back. Like the
Mhm.
fact that you've stolen it is the more problematic thing, not that you're hitting them with it. If it's a
Yeah.
Voltron
Yeah.
commander, it's a little bit of a different case because you could just kill them. But odds are it's not a Voltron deck. Like in Wart, let's say I used Wart earlier. I'll use it again. If you play Nihilor and gain control of Wart, he only has 3 power. You're not going to want to swing at me with Wart. You're going to want to just keep her there, make her sit there and be wasted because I can't do anything about it. But
Yep.
if you swing with her, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to just block it, kill it, and cast it on my turn. Like, again, I don't feel like attacking is what should be triggering any kind of benefit from having stolen things, especially in Esper.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Yeah, like that's somebody in our pod has Memnarch, right? And that's the main thing is like I want to be able to kill my commander after it's been taken, so I can recast that as quickly as I can, and get back on my game plan. So it's just better for me if I or better for me as the Steal Things player if I don't attack with that and just keep it protected and out of the owner's hands for as long as I can.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we just pummeled it with cons just there, but I think it does have the cons of it feel less like necessarily weaknesses, but they just don't feel right in the colors or something. I can't really explain it. Like the fact that the mind control is happening is really cool. It's cool you get to take three things, and it's cool you get to use creatures to do it. But then it cares about power, only Nihilor, and then the fact you've stolen them only triggers on attack. It's just weird.
Yeah, yeah. I think it just the second ability doesn't really match up in my mind with Esper colors, but I don't know. I think overall, it's interesting, and you could probably make a fun deck out of it.
Yeah, I think you definitely could, especially if you play into the ETB flicker kind of
Hmm.
effect like we were talking about. So at 375, not a bad commander option. We like him, don't love him. He could be very fun. Uh, but yeah, it'd be an interesting brew nonetheless.
Yep.
All
All
right.
right.
Yep, go ahead, take it, Zach.
All right. So the last precon we're talking about here is going to be the Planar Portal precon, and the commander for this is, or the poster commander is Prosper Tomebound. So I'll go ahead and read him. So Prosper Tomebound is a 1/4 legendary creature, uh, Deathwing Warlock. It costs 2 black red. It's Death Touch and Mystic Arcanum. Which is at the beginning of your end step, exile the top card of your library until the end of your next turn. You may play that card. And he has Pact Boon. Whenever you play a card from exile, create a treasure token. So I think this guy's pretty interesting. Maybe a little bit on the expensive side mana wise for what he does. I would have liked to see him at 3 CMC, I think. Uh, but I think being able to play cards from exile is, like we've mentioned a couple times, getting better in red and other colors as well. Um, and creating treasure tokens is generally good. I like treasure tokens. I think they're pretty strong compared to other token types, like say food or clues or anything like that. I think treasure's probably stronger than most other popular token types.
Yeah, I agree. I at first when I first saw this guy, I just read him over. I'm like, okay, he just does a thing. I don't really care that much. But then as I looked at him a little bit more, I'm like, you know what? I do actually like exiling cards and casting them. And that happens a lot in red. It's happening more often. It's happening better. So getting mana for doing it actually feels pretty good. Um, I kind of wish his Mystic Arcanum did a little bit more than just end step exile something. Um, I think his second effect is really good, but I wish he did a little bit more in terms of the exile, like maybe like look at the top three, exile one, put the other two in your graveyard or something like that, just to give you a little bit more options in terms of exiling. But generally, I think he's pretty cool. I think he could be a lot of fun. Some cards we thought that'd be really powerful in this deck. First one is Zorn, which we talked about in our last episode of the set review. 2 and a red for a 3/2 creature. If you would create one or more treasure tokens, instead create those tokens plus an additional one. So you're not netting 2 mana every time you cast something from exile, which can be incredibly powerful. I mean, if you exile a Faithless Looting off the top of your deck and cast that, and then you get 2 treasures out of it, I mean, that's value. I really like that type of play in my head for this deck. Another really good one is Ignite the Future, which I talked about in a previous episode. It costs 3 and a red for a sorcery. Exile the top 3 cards of your library until end of your next turn. You may play those cards. If this spell is cast from your graveyard, you may play those spells without playing their mana cost. And it has flashback for 7 and a red. So again, this is just another great example. I mean, you pay 4, and you get to essentially draw 3. If you crack all those, you get 3 treasures. You can put that towards the flashback cost at 8. If you get that off, I mean, you're going to get 3 free treasures, the 3 free spells as well. Like, that's just really good. I see this deck offering a lot of value for red black, especially. So I really like it.
Yeah, I think it's good. I think, like you said, it would have been nice if it wasn't just exile the top card. Like if you could look at the top 2 or 3 and choose, that would give you more consistency, I think. But
Mm-hmm.
I like the ignite the future and light up the stage type effects. I think that's a good way to take it. Uh, it would be nice if there was a kind of a clear win con, but at the same time,
True.
this gives you more options. But yeah, I think overall he's pretty interesting. He's I like treasures. I like the exiling stuff and being able to play it from exile. I think is a good and fun mechanic.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we only mentioned really red cards for him, like light up the stage, spectacle, exile top two, you can cast them, and the other two, um, Zorn and Ignite the Future. So obviously, I think this deck favors red. It's probably, I would imagine, like 60-40 red. Your black is probably going to be your removal, protection, maybe some recursion. Maybe your win con is reds, or sorry, black somewhere in there. So I'm not really sure what the build entirely would look like, but I think it'd be maybe some big demons because you're getting treasures off of everything you cast.
Hmm.
I'm not really sure. It just there's a lot of cool ways you could build this deck. I think. I know he mentioned the cons. Wishing his Mystic Arcanum ability did a little bit more. Is there anything else that you would that you think is a con for this guy?
Uh, Not really. I mean, like I said, I would have liked to see him at 3 CMC. I think that would be a
Yeah.
little more in line with his abilities. He does have Death Touch, which is nice, but yeah, I don't know. I wish there was a clearer win con. Like you said, there are a lot of different ways you could take it. Maybe demons, maybe something else, but it would be nice to have that be a little more clear instead of just having kind of a passive ability that doesn't really care specifically about what you're playing, just that you're kind of exiling things and playing.
Yeah, I think in the past couple years, Black Red has actually gotten a lot of really unique commanders that just do more than Black Red usually does, and I'm
Hmm.
really enjoying that. And he falls into that area. He's currently at $5, 27 cents. I think that's actually, maybe a little bit high, but I do again think that for Black Red, this is pretty not Black Red. I guess. I mean, yes, exiling things is red, but in terms of it's almost like Red Black Spellslinger, which kind of is weird. So I like it.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Yeah. Moving on to the last of our 8 commanders is, and the last one of our Planar Portal deck commanders is, oh boy, Karazakar, the Eye Tyrant. 3 black red for a 5/5 legendary creature, Beholder. Whenever you attack a player, tap target creature that player controls and goad it. Goad, if you don't know, says until your next turn, that creature attacks each combat if able and attacks a player other than you if able. Whenever an opponent attacks another one of your opponents, you and the attacking player each draw a card and lose 1 life. What's your feelings on Karazakar, Zach?
Yeah, so this is feels like a really red effect with Goad, caring about things attacking people, uh, and then drawing a card and losing a life is more in line with the black color identity, I would say. But I like it. I think it's kind of like a chaos type thing where you want people to attack, but you want them to attack things other than you, and you're incentivizing them to do that. I think that's a cool kind of a political thing. Uh, and drawing a card always good, obviously, and you probably don't care too much about the uh, loss of life since it's just a one at a time. So I think it's interesting. So some of the cards that we are looking at putting in here are like basically encouraging the goad and attacking other people type strategies. So some we put in is disrupt discorum for 2 red. It's goad all creatures you don't control. So obviously they're going to be attacking other people instead of you and being forced to attack. So you're going to draw a lot of cards from that, hopefully. Yeah, something else is Carter Doomscourge, and when he enters the battlefield, uh, creatures your opponents control until your next turn attack each combat if able and attack a player other than you if able. So essentially they're goaded. It just doesn't have the keyword on it. And whenever an attacking creature dies, each opponent loses a life and you gain a life. So that'll actually kind of counteract the life loss from your commander. And the last card that we think would be good in here is Hellish Rebuke. It's 2 and a black for an instant. And until in a turn permanent your opponent's control gain, when this permanent deals damage to the player who cast Hellish Rebuke, sacrifice it, and you lose 2 life. So, let's see. So basically, you're kind of de-incentivizing people from attacking you because their stuff is gonna get sacrificed.
Yeah, I think this is kind of a uh, ace up your sleeve kind of moment where something has gone wrong. Maybe your commander's gotten removed, or you were unable to goad going into the turn, and someone wants to come at you. You just cast this and basically wipe their board.
Hmm.
So it doesn't. I don't want to say it's a non-bow because it doesn't necessarily it doesn't affect if they hit someone else, which is what you want to do, but this is a strong utility card because you need to be ready for if something doesn't go your way, and I think this is a premier card that does that for 3 mana at instant speed. I mean, that's pretty good. Wiping someone's board, basically, is very
Yeah,
powerful. Now,
yeah,
Disrupt Decorum is kind of the same boat as Agent of Treachery, where it's like near $5. But in this deck, again, force include, man. 4 mana to goad everything. You might kill yourself from drawing cards. You goad so much stuff. And that's a good problem, usually, in the way I see it, because if you're drawing that many cards, you're going to be in a good spot when it comes back around to you for 4 mana. And who knows what creatures get wiped out in the time that everything's goaded.
yep, completely agree.
Um, what are the cons you see in this commander, Zach?
Uh, I mean, I don't think there's any like explicit cons on the card itself. I mean, losing 1 life is obviously like a small con, but kind of fits the black color identity and
Mhm.
isn't a huge deal most of the time. Uh, the other thing is like drawing a card isn't always going to be enough to incentivize people to attack someone else. I think you're going to want to run things like Hellish Rebuke that are really going to, kind of help get people in line as far as, if they decide to attack you anyway, they're going to get punished for it.
Yeah, because we're not in white blue. We don't have your propagandas, your ghostly
Right.
prisons, and stuff like
Right.
that. So you need
Yeah.
to
Don't
find
have all
another way to
those.
do it.
Yeah. Don't have as many pillow fort type effects. But yeah, and I think overall he's interesting. There might be other commanders out around. I can't really think of anything off the top of my head that's the same in black red, but like I think uh there are some red decks that maybe would do similar things. Like red is generally gonna care about goading. I
Hmm.
do like the kind of like political aspect to it.
Yeah, any commander that has politics attached to it, Zach and I automatically kind of gravitate towards because that's what we like a lot in Commander. And I think he does offer it. And again, both of the effects are very red, and the other one's very black, but they're done in a way that, again, it's kind of playing outside of normal red black by causing politics, and it's really
Hmm.
cool.
Yeah.
Um, a con for me is to get uh Karazakar to goad something, you have to kind of go shields down. Whenever you attack a player, tap a creature that player controls and goad it. So, if you attack with 3 things, that's all you have. You're going to goad 3 creatures. That's probably only going to be a third or half of the creatures your opponents have out. So you might go shields down to goad. So that's why I think it's a good way to goad it in other ways with, like we said, disrupt decorum and stuff like that.
Yeah, I agree. I think that also is probably going to require some setup because if you're only attacking with Karazakar, you're only got a good one thing. That's not really going to do much for you. So like goading with other stuff, I think is the better option. But also, maybe if you want to go for like a token strategy so that you
Yeah,
can just goad as many things as possible, maybe run like a Krenko Street Kingpin or something like that.
true.
You know, it's another option.
Yeah, that's a good point. At 5 mana, 5/5, it's not too bad. 5 feels on the higher end for red black, but it
Mhm.
could be worse. I'd rather see him at like a 3/3 for 4. I'd even take because
Yeah,
odds are you're probably not attacking with Karazakar anyway. So yeah, anything else for Karazakar?
I think that's it for me.
Cool. I think that about wraps up our review of the Commander Adventures of Forgotten Realms Commander decks. Covered all 8 of the mythics from each deck. Talked about cards that might be good in them, cards that are good in them, pros, cons, game plan. Um, Anything else you want to close out? Any review overall, Zach, of this Commander set?
Sure. So I think overall, there's no commander here that I just think is just bad. I think they're
Yeah,
all interesting and pretty unique for the most part. I think out of all of these, there's two or three that I think are pretty strong, like Galia and Rondus, I think are strong.
me
Maybe even
too.
Sephiroth in some ways. But yeah, I think there's some really interesting stuff here, and I would definitely enjoy playing all of these, I think.
Yeah, I think I would too. I'm really happy with this one. Sometimes we're a little bit spoiled sometimes as commander players with the number of
Mhm.
commander decks they're putting out each year. Not all the time is there 30 brand new cards in them, but there are brand new commanders pretty much every set in those decks on top of whatever is in the actual set itself. So it's good to see this kind of consistent flow of nice, good commanders that are made for the format. And I agree. I don't hate any of these. I could play them all. I'd be happy to play them all. Do you have a single favorite, Zach?
Uh, I would probably say Cloth is my favorite.
I was gonna say Vrondis or Galia. I think are my favorites. I probably just if I had to pick one, just Vrondis. So I mean, I think you and I both like red green anyway. We know
Mhm.
Stompy can be actually kind of good if done right. It doesn't seem like it. Maybe in competitive, not so much, but in our format, big old battle cruiser is actually not bad. And I like both of them. So yeah, there you have it. Vrondis and Cloth are the best commanders of this. I'm just kidding. No, but yeah, they're very good, and all of them are good. So I'm happy with the set.
Yep, me too.
Well, if you enjoyed listening to this episode of the Cyclonic Thrift, go ahead and like the video and subscribe to see our upcoming videos in the future. We should have our first ever deck tech coming out real soon, as well as some discussion on changes to Magic. Potentially, we'll be tackling the historic Jumpstart set that is upcoming, our thoughts on that. If you want to see when that video is coming out or join our community, you can follow us on Twitter or join our Discord. The links are in the description below. Beyond that, thanks again for listening. If you want it to help us grow, go ahead and share it to your friends. Let them know what we're doing here. We have fun doing it. Um, and we just want to keep doing the best we can to bring you good budget Commander content. Anything else you want to add before we head out of here, Zach?
Nope. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Yep. We'll see you next time.